So I want to welcome you to an aspect of decision and risk analysis known as data envelopment analysis. We have to deal with numbers a lot. The basic rules are there, okay, as you know. Work hard before the class, meditate before you start. Put your phone not even on vibration, take it off. Just concentrate, 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 focus, 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 focus. I said focus. That is what you need to do to be able to understand a master's degree course. And ask questions. The best way in bettering your caliber lies in two things. One, asking questions. Two, is practicing. Ask questions, practice. Ask, practice, ask, practice, ask, practice. And that's it. The basic tenets of decision analysis, you've already gone through that. I'm not going to go through much of that. But the aspect of the decision analysis we are going to look at is efficiency measurement. Efficiency measurement is one of the tools of decision and risk analysis. Efficiency measurement. And there are quite a number of references. I'm sure you guys were given this particular book. Do you remember Making Hard Decisions?
Yes, Doc.
Now, there is this red book as well that I'm giving you that you need to use for this purpose. Okay. It's a very, very important book.
Oh.
So I'm going to basically give you an idea about what we are going to do. There'll be quite kind of 3 questions in here. There'll be 3 questions from what you've already done. And there'll be 3 questions also from here. And you will answer 4. So I'm going to teach this thing very practically because I'm teaching you with an intention as though you have a paper you're going to write, a journal article you're going to write, a thesis you're going to write. Because everything in this area here, you can use it to write your thesis. You can use it to write your master's, PhD thesis, or even publications. So it's very important that you understand it. And you will see that it follows the structure of dissertation, thesis writing, as well as journal writing. In fact, you will even write a paper based on this. All right. So the main thing we are looking at is efficiency of a company, efficiency of a country, efficiency of anything, And we want to understand why you got to learn efficiency. The reason why you got to learn efficiency, and you see that very soon, is because it gives you the ability to select the best practice firms, the best practice organization. The word companies, firms, organizations, decision-making units is the same term that we shall be using in this module. You can select the best guys among every guy in any company. For example, you can select the best teachers, the best students. You can select the best banks from among the banks, the best schools from among the schools, the best government from among the government, the best insurance firms among the insurance firms, the best of the best. Efficiency analysis also allows you to compare those that are doing well with those that are not doing well. You can identify those that are efficient from those that are not efficient. You can detect what is driving the efficiency, the sources of inefficiency. You can determine what they've got to do to be efficient for those that are not efficient. We call it improvement targets. Knowing the knowledge, having the knowledge of efficiency can help to make policies in terms of budget cuts, in terms of revenue generation. So efficiency analysis is a very practical thing, not only for managers, but also for government, for companies, for individuals. If you understand the concept of efficiency, it can help you to identify gaps in the literature. You can write a beautiful dissertation, essay, journal article. You will know clearly how to become a true academic. If you're a manager, it can help you to compete very well with your competitors. You can determine whether you got to merge with a company or not based on the size. We call it the returns to scale that you have. You can identify the trends in the industry. You can identify the patterns, the leaps and bumps, the highs and the lows of all of this. So the efficiency analysis we are going to be looking at will help handle all of the above. The firms, the companies, the organizations, they are called DMUs, decision-making units. Those are the ones that we are going to. But before you undertake efficiency analysis, and this is a very big topical area, you've got to select these decision-making units, these firms, these countries, these individuals, these items. I just wanted to know that it's not just about companies. It can even be items like shipping containers. You want to identify the most shipping containers from those that are not the most shipping containers. So that's the first thing you got to do, is to select which decision-making units you want to assess. And we are going to be listing a lot of them right now. Those decision-making units, they are those you got to evaluate. And the way you evaluate them is to benchmark each other against the other. In the process, you will encounter things you control and things you don't control. For example, as a manager of a university, you may control the number of students you got to admit, how much salaries you got to pay to people. But you cannot control certain things in the school. For example, sometimes you cannot even control the failures. You cannot control certain things. In other words, as a university, certain things might be outside your control. Strike, roadblocks, demonstrations. You cannot control that. And these are called environmental factors, which are later analyzed. So let's look at a typical decision-making unit. The branch of a bank, the department of a university, the universities itself, a profit-making company, a non-profit-making company. What make up the decision-making unit are the inputs as well as the outputs. So the decision-making unit cannot be called a company, a firm, an organization, unless you know the inputs and the outputs. For example, you cannot say that this is a bank and yet this is a secondary school. There are characteristics that fit a bank, and there are characteristics that fit a secondary school. You cannot go to the secondary school and expect to see deposits or loans, but that does not define a secondary school. But when you go to a bank, you can identify a deposit and loans and advances. And these deposits and the loans and advances, these are called inputs and outputs. You can't go to a bank and then you identify schools, students, incoming students, or outgoing students, because that is not typical characteristics of a bank. So the inputs and the outputs, they are the variables that make up the DMU, and they have to be known. What the DMU is doing is that it is using the inputs or transforming those inputs into the outputs. The transformation process requires certain assumptions The process goes on in something we call the technological space or the production possibility set. I will come and look at that. When the time you are talking about efficiency analysis, analysis is a relative concept. It's not the efficiency of you. The moment I mentioned your efficiency, I'm speaking of it in relation to someone's efficiency. And so efficiency analysis is a comparative efficiency analysis. It's not just on its own. Let's look at some of the DMUs. I want each one of you to mention DMUs that are not on the screen. Give me a simple DMU that is not on the screen, not the ones on the screen. Okay? The ones on the screen, we have schools. Even with the schools, you can split them into primary, secondary, tertiary, hospitals, museums, libraries, post office, the police, the Air Force, the Navy, IRS, and so many things. Give me an example of a decision-making unit. Who can give me a typical example of a decision-making unit? Justina, give me one.
Doc, a ministry in the country.
You mean like the Ministry of Defense, Ministry
of Defense, fine, yeah.
Okay. Good. What else? Isaac, give me an example of a decision-making unit.
Doc, the finance department of a school.
Oh, what is that? The finance department of a school. Now, note that it shouldn't necessarily be a non-profit organization. It could be making profit or it could not be making profit. Frank, give me one. Alex, give me one. Dinah and Emily, everybody, give me one, please. Yes, Frank.
You can have the OMCs in Ghana.
Oil marketing companies.
Yeah, oil marketing company. And for instance, maybe if you have GOEL as a company, you can also look at the various stations, the stations, the outlets. So each of the outlets become a DMU. So.
It is. Emily.
Okay, Doc, you can take a look at supermarkets in a certain place.
Good. Dinah. Alex,
you can have the insurance companies.
Thank you. Alex.
Doc, you can have the telecommunication companies like MTN Ghana.
Good. So all of these are examples of DMUs. And believe you me, you can write a paper on each one of them. As you can see, some of them are profit-making. Some of them are not. But based on efficiency analysis, you will notice that one major thing is required to be able to do an effective comparative efficiency analysis. What is that? Based on all that you've said, one major thing is required in order to do an effective comparative efficiency analysis. What is that? Without that, there is no efficiency analysis. What is that? There's one. Yeah, Justina.
Doc, you need some information about the DMU.
What information do you mean?
You need to know something about them to be able to analyze whatever you are
what is that
analyzing about that. You need data.
That's it. That's the point. You need data. Data is oil. And so without data, you cannot do any efficiency analysis. You don't need a questionnaire. You need data. And so data is very crucial to be able to undertake efficiency analysis. And it is this data that we call inputs and outputs. The inputs are used to produce the outputs, or the inputs are transformed into the outputs. data is everything in efficiency analysis. So sometimes when a person wants to write a thesis, a journal, I say, how are we going to, that's the first question I ask. How are we going to get the data? How would you get a data? But right now there's something that I'm working with someone and we are struggling because we thought it was going to be easy. Now looking for the data, we realize that it's not easy. Sometimes the data is not found immediately, but you can index it. You can create an index from that. So the first thing you need to do is to get the company's name, the DMUs. And one of the things about the DMUs is that they have to be homogeneous. What do we mean when we say the DMUs or the decision-making units or the organizations have to be homogeneous? What do we mean? And I'll ask you a question if you tell me what it is. Dinah, what do we mean?
So it means that they should have the same characteristics, as in their inputs and outputs should be the same.
Give me an example and then a one that is not an example, a bad example and a good example.
Okay, so for a good example, I'll take the banks. So we know that they have deposits, they have fixed assets, which could be their inputs. And if you take every bank, they have such as an input. And then for the outputs, we're looking at loans and investments. And that cuts across for all banks. But then for a bad example, we can look at even the schools. You can't compare a secondary school with a tertiary school because their inputs and outputs are different.
Good. So give me some of the inputs and outputs that are different that you cannot compare.
Okay, so we can look at the syllables. For secondary schools, that will be different from the syllables for a tertiary schools. And then we can also look at the qualification of the teachers. That would also be different from the lecturers in the tertiary sector.
So these things you are talking about, are they inputs or outputs?
They are inputs.
Okay. That's fine. And you can not compare the outgoing students because the outgoing students of a primary school are not the same as the outgoing students of a university school.
Yes, Doc.
So even among the schools, you got to distinguish between primary, secondary, and tertiary. Even the tertiary, you cannot compare polytechnics with the universities. You know, so the homogeneity has to be present. Isaac.
So building on Dinah's own, would it mean that we can't say that we want an output of graduates of a secondary school when you're looking at a unit like a bank?
Correct. You can't. Okay. Because they are doing different things. So for efficiency analysis to be good, not to be good, to even be done, there must be homogeneity of the units. There must be homogeneity of the companies. The companies must be homogeneous. You cannot compare even an insurance firm or insurance firms with banking firms. It's not possibly sensible. It's not sensible. You can't. You can't compare a police depot with an army depot. They are different. Neither can you compare, countries with capitals. No, if you are comparing countries, you compare countries. If you are comparing cities or capitals of a country, you're comparing that. Homogeneity. It has to be present in there. So the first step in efficiency analysis, yes, Alex. Alex, your hand is up.
Okay, Doc, thank you. Please, on the homogeneity, I want to understand So what if you are comparing, you have DMUs, and then by looking at them, they are different, but what you are actually interested in, they have some commonality. If you take, for example, the banks and then the telecommunication networks, and maybe you want to look at the mobile banking in that regard. If you're comparing the two or you cluster the two together, does it defile that homogeneity kind of?
A bank and mobile banking.
Yes, a bank as an entity, and then the telecommunication networks.
Yeah, well, you can see clearly
And
that there's a mismatch. Clear mismatch. What are the banks mainly producing? Loans and advances, investments, and other things like, let's even add something that might be common to telecoms. Let's say the final one is corporate social responsibility. Now, the telecoms may produce corporate social responsibility, but they are not producing loans and advances. They are not producing investments. They are not even collecting deposits that the banks are collecting. It would be useless to compare them because they are not homogeneous. One of the basic principles of economic efficiency is homogeneity. And practically, they are not. So if you are comparing telecom, compare only telecoms among telecoms. Okay? Because the managers of the bank are not going to be happy if you come and tell them that the telecoms are doing better than you. Okay. Now, if you want to compare them, then you have to take care, you have to address the heterogeneity. That is a possibility. That is a possibility. But you don't want to address an internal heterogeneity. You only want to address an external heterogeneity. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if you are addressing heterogeneity, like GDP affects both banks and telecoms. So that is external heterogeneity. Okay. The telecoms may be having a certain regulation. The banks may also have a certain regulation. It's external heterogeneity. But then the telecoms don't have deposits. The banks have deposits. Okay. That is an internal, you cannot, the moment there is an internal heterogeneity, you cannot compare them. Alex, do you get it?
Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc. I get it. I was looking at it from the mobile money point of view and being similar to how the banks are also operating.
Oh, you mean like they collecting deposits of people, but then they don't use that to do investment, or they do?
Yes, sometimes they have investment, they have loans, they have all those.
Who? The telecoms?
Yes.
It has to be agreed by the banks. So when you are comparing them, managers of the bank should agree that these people, whatever activity they are engaged in, is similar to the activity they are engaged in. And if you put it down pen and paper, they will tell you that it's not. It has to be agreeable to all the parties.
Okay, Doc.
Before the efficiency analysis can be undertaken. Now, the next step after selecting the DMUs is to select the inputs and the outputs. Choose inputs and outputs that are homogeneous. I've already almost said that. Okay. Now, the DMUs are defined by the inputs and outputs. So you must have an X input and an X output for every DMU. Every one of them. You must have it. However, it's not always the case for some organizations, and that's why it's very important to recognize the select. Look, the most difficult aspect of efficiency analysis is this one, selecting the input and output. Now, efficiency analysis is a benchmarking exercise, and that's why it's important to know what a benchmarking is. What is benchmarking? Benchmarking basically deals with comparing one's business processes, to an industry best or to the best practice from the other industry. So you want to compare yourself to the average. You remember, the industry is the average. So you can take the average profit of the industry. That is from all the firms. And then you will have a particular firm. And then you compare whether that particular firm is more than the average or less than the average. Well, that's great, but that's a benchmarking exercise, but that is not the best benchmarking exercise. The best is to identify the best guys, not the average guys. Because remember, the average guys can include a very, very, useless organization. And you want to compare that useless, that useless organization, if it is an outlier, is worse. It would drive the average towards itself. So it's very important to know. When you are selecting the inputs, and the input and output are used, they are not necessarily the inputs and outputs used in the production process. The ones that are in a benchmarking exercise. They are not the same one in this one here. So the next thing is this. What kind of inputs and outputs should you have? Well, very, very sensible ones. They must be measurable. If they are not measurable, it's not possible. Okay? You got to be able to quantify them numerically. They must be meaningful, meaning that the managers of every organization must agree that, oh yes, I can understand that this is an input, this is an output. Don't worry, we'll come to the depth of the input and output again. And they must be comprehensive. So when you're selecting an input, it must be an input that captures several things. Comprehensive input, comprehensive. Now, there's a video here that will tell you, this is a lecture by this Indian professor that shows you, this input and output. It's a very, very wonderful, video that shows you about the input and output. Let me see if I can show you. So it's quite an old video. And you might know about this man, Dinah and Emily. You know Ray and Desley?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
That's Subhash Ray.
You must be wondering what is this thing that he is wearing. This
That's
is a
Subhash
hearing
Ray.
aid.
Remember?
And what is this thing where he is hearing? This is also another hearing aid, which means that I have got hearing problem on both ears. And it is a set of XY such that the X and Y are exactly lying on the line. We have got smoke emission at the power plant, and sometimes people treat this as an input in the power generating process, much like fossil fuel. One is that unless all units.
So the point I'm just trying to show you guys is that it is not simple to just get up and, you must select an input and output that is acceptable, generalizable. Okay. So sometimes when you go through the exercise with your supervisor, and then it becomes clear. Now, of course, there are other ways to get the input by looking into the literature. And then you'd have known. Okay, so and remember, you can go into a new area nobody has looked at. Let's say you want to look at clubs, or you want to look at a restaurant. Maybe people are doing hotels, so you want to look at a restaurant. Maybe people are not, nobody has done choba. Okay. For example, churches. People have not done the efficiency analysis of churches. Nobody, I know this, nobody has done it. So you might want to look at that. And it's what makes it unique is what kind of inputs and outputs you are going to use. So what input would have come into your mind, Emily, for churches? You are also married.
Okay, so Doc, for church, maybe the number of Christians that go there will be 1.
The number of worshippers who go to the church.
Yes, Doc.
Okay. And now what
the number of times they meet.
The number of what?
No, the number of times they meet in a week.
Okay. Why should that matter?
Okay, no, because in every meeting they take off a tree. So that can also.
Okay. I understand. You see, I know where you are coming from. Okay, what else?
Okay, the site, okay, okay, let's say the location. I don't think the location really should count, or they should count, because in urban areas they'll get more people. So
but then how do you quantify the location here? It looks more like a dummy to me.
Okay, yeah, it would be a dummy. Okay.
But we need Justina, which other ones do you have in mind that can define the inputs or outputs of a church?
Look, we can look at true worshippers.
What do you mean by that?
It's not everybody who goes to church can be classified as a Christian or a believer.
Okay, so I'm coming back to your point. Emily, that's why I had a question mark on what you said. You said that the worshippers. You see, the same way in a school, we talk about incoming students and outgoing students, isn't it?
Yes.
So how do we bring that into the church?
But Doc, counter question. I think as long as they come to the church to sit down, they should be all classified the same, because
there must be a way to classify them separately. I mean, separate them. Can't we talk about the baptized and the unbaptized? Huh?
But Doc, how would that account for the efficiency? Because
okay,
if they are there.
So let me tell you, to determine that a church is probably efficient, it is the ability of the church to have trained people to get to the level of baptism. Then when you have been able to get people that have been truly well baptized, we can now use that to determine that it is going to count as part of your efficiency. I'm just thinking aloud in terms of the university, incoming and outgoing students. What do you say? The rest of you? Frank? You know, this thing I'm asking you, a certain big church have asked me whether we can do an exercise. They were ready to pay a lot of money.
Yeah. Doc, I think their assets
you all
also
know
would count.
money is involved. Bring your idea.
Doc, I think their assets would also count, assets of the church.
Yes, that is true. You know, the classical microeconomic knowledge. So there must be labor, there must be capital. Okay, so assets. I agree with that. That would be an input. But let's deal with the main material. You see, in every efficiency analysis, there is a main material. For example, if you are doing energy efficiency, the main material is energy. And then there is a main output of that input. So when you look at a bank, the main material is what?
Deposits.
Money.
Deposit, exactly. Not just money, but deposit. And these deposits eventually generate what? The output of the deposit is loans and advances.
And investments,
You know, that's it. When you go to a university, the main material is incoming students who are then transformed into outgoing students or graduates. When you go to oil, the main materials are oil reserves, gas reserves. Then the output becomes oil produced, gas produced. So here, for the church, what's going to be the main material?
So would we look at the converts? Converts. As in new people that we were able to convert.
As against what?
Against the baptized ones.
Oh, so the number of people, you mean they can be classified as converts and baptized?
I think so.
Why the converts are who and the baptized are who?
The converts are the incoming, the inputs.
But why do you call them converts?
As in, you evangelize to them and then bring them to Christ. So
they come to the church,
bringing them
then they have been converted.
They'll go through a process.
If they go through a process, then they are not.
Okay.
Then they are not, because then they are going through a process which will eventually make them an output.
Okay.
So the converts to me looks more like people who have been baptized rather.
Okay. Wow.
Because every time there will be people that are coming and they will not come again. But at the end of the day, the baptized will always be there, isn't it?
Most probably.
What are you saying, Alex? What are the rest of you saying? But this is an
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Doc. On the issue of the church members and then there being input and output, I think I kind of disagree with saying that the converts when you enter the church, when you go out and then for people to agree to follow you to the church, it's like a hospital. So if people agree to come, I think that's the first step. So you can classify that one as input. And when they are actually,
what do we call them? What should we call them?
You mean the general name or like input?
You can't call it input. You have to mention a proper name. Like the way we have a deposit for a bank, incoming students for a school.
Okay.
See, you are lost. That's why she coined her own term, convert.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
So I'm just thinking out loud now. In a church, you have people who attend the church. Generally, the church is looking at transforming people's life so that they eventually transform the society. That's looking at it, taking it from the end. You are expected to produce members who are of good quality, probably eventually so that they will affect their society. So the input in church they start from becoming either visiting or people who are churchgoers. And then those who have been evangelized, that's when they become members of the church after being converted. Then you
don't have another three groups.
You don't have 3 groups. Yeah, so that we can congregate congregate some of them into one component and others as the other components, such that in the first component, you'd have people who are members.
What name should we give to the input? What name should we give to the output?
The input.
You who can go around and talk. I just want names.
So can we call the inputs the newcomers?
Newcomers. And then the output
will be the members. The
members. Okay, so it means that the newcomers, not all of them are members.
Oh, they become parts of, but they are inputs. They are now coming to join the membership.
Okay. It's an interesting exercise. The fact that we are even talking about this up and down is an indication that input and output selection is not a joke.
It's not easy. Yeah.
That's all it means. Okay? It means that, so when you sometimes see that somebody has written a paper has used the input and output, and you pick it and you just use it, remember that a lot of effort went into it in the first definition of it that you are now finally using. Input and output are very critical. Anyway, so that's an exercise to begin to look at. It will be a very nice novel application of any efficiency analysis. Now, what makes a variable an input? Because here we are talking about incoming students and outgoing students. Here, every year we need to talk about incoming members. Okay, and then converted members or something. What makes an input? And this is critical because this will make you want to even cut off some of the things you said. One thing about the input is that you want to reduce them. That is one thing about the input. The goal is to reduce the input and then increase the output. Of course, the churches make profit. And what do you think they want to do to their profit or revenues? It's quite interesting. I'm using churches today. What do you think they want to do with their profit or revenue? Justina. Frank. What do they want to do with their profits or revenue? Yeah, Emily.
Doc, the correct answer would be to maybe help widows and then give aids to the poor.
No,
and the
what
rest.
I mean is that, do they want to raise it or reduce it?
Doc, that one, no
Doc,
matter the organization, it will be.
They will be interested in maximizing it, increasing
to
it.
expand.
They'll be interested in maximizing. Frank says. What did you say? Justina, were you the one talking?
So it's me. I said it.
No.
Okay, so Frank says maximize. What did you say, Emily?
No, I was saying that no matter the organization, the aim will always be to raise the profit.
So are the churches making profit?
Yeah, so the churches, they are making profit. In fact, if there's a branch and the branch is not making profit, they either change the person who is in charge, or maybe they do a lot so that they can always make profit.
Look, I don't know about that, but I know that the aim definitely is to make profit.
Oh.
As to what the profit is being used for is another topic, I think. But
Isaac, you think the aim is to make profit?
Not to maximize.
Maximize aim, increase the same thing. Emily, is their goal to make profit?
Yes, Doc. It's one of the goals. It's just one of the goals.
That they need to make profit in the name of God.
No, they need the profit for the other activities, the other aims. So they need to maximize it.
Okay. Wow. So it's not a business then.
Doc, I don't. Sorry, I don't think I agree. I know
what you are good at is whether you agree or you don't agree. So you tell us why.
Yes, certainly the making of the profit would, as a human institution, will be there, but it's not the ultimate goal. So I don't think we can.
She didn't also say that is the ultimate goal. It says one of the goals.
Well.
So unless you are saying that you don't think it's one of the goals. There are people listening, when you talk, remember that. Is it one of the goals or is not?
No, it's not. It's not.
So it's not a goal at all.
Yes, it's not a goal.
Okay, so you mean that churches that we have all across the world, particularly in Africa, these people set up the churches without any goal of profit making?
Talk.
No, let him talk. I know you will come.
Yes, Doc. There's well, if someone has it's personal.
Obi Nim will agree with you. Obi Nim will agree with you. Above all will agree with you. Or Agrada will agree with you.
Yes, I think that. Okay.
What are you saying, Dinah?
Doc, I was saying that we could call it a revenue in the sense that I agree with Alex. It's not like that is their aim to make profits. But you see, the church has so many things that they also want to give back to society, and getting more revenue through offering and all that will help them, you know.
I agree. But a lot of people say that the church leaders are profiteers because you see the cars they drive, the houses they live in, the dressings they have, and the accounts, the fat accounts they have. So that is what is driving this. I mean, you and I know what we are talking about.
So Doc, I think that it will be difficult to assess these churches, because even the churches, we have the one-man churches, and we have the Orthodox and the Catholic, the
So that one is just
Presbyterian.
categorization, just like primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Okay.
But they are all churches. And when we say church, we are talking about all of them. Whether it's 10 man or 1 man or 30 man. Guys, so the key point is that inputs are minimized, outputs are maximized. So if the church's goal is to increase profit or revenue, we can call it anything. As long as the money comes, whether it's profit or revenue, it's just a matter of morality. Okay? We don't care whether it's profit, we don't care whether it's revenue. It's money. Money has come. What you got to ask yourself is whether their goal is to minimize the labor force. That's what you want to do. Okay? But it doesn't look like these people want to minimize the labor force. In fact, even if you look at a university, the university's goal is not to minimize the incoming students. They want to maximize. So some of the inputs are inputs you don't want to minimize. Now, when you don't want to minimize an input, it becomes a non-discretionary input. Take note. A non-discretionary input. And I think this aspect of inputs has not been looked at much in the literature. If it is an output that you don't really want to maximize, okay, you don't want to maximize, because in maximizing it, it might cause an issue. This output becomes non-discretionary output. But the key point is that generally with the input, you want to cut down, with the output, you want to reduce. That's the key. There is also undesirable outputs and undesirable inputs. For example, dustbin, when you look at the house, in the preparation of food, you produce a good output, which is a food. But you also, in the process, as a byproduct of the food, you also produce an undesirable part of the output, which becomes the refuse from the food that you dump. And that is a typical example of a good and a bad output, where the good output, the bad output is a byproduct of the good output. You can give me another example. Nobody should tell me about carbon dioxide and emissions. You can give me another example. And don't tell me about pollutants, anything, whether it's air pollution, water pollution, land pollution. What is another example of undesirable output? For Isaac and Justina, obviously, might not know, but for the rest, you should be able to get an idea. Who can give me another example? Frank, Emily, Donna, Alex. Undesirable. Oh, you all had pollutants in mind there.
Doc, please, Alex is our third cosmate.
It doesn't matter. He's shown that he's a strong man. Alex, you're a strong man, aren't you?
Yes, I am, Doc. I am.
So if you are, don't mute yourself. Give me one example of an output that is not really desirable. It's a byproduct of a good output.
Okay, so can we use the palm oil and then the palm kernel?
Explain.
So in producing the palm oil, you end up getting the palm kernel, which was not your intention, though.
Okay, but it has to be bad. It's not just supposed to be a byproduct, but it's a bad byproduct. What you've just given is a good thing, but it's a good byproduct. It should be something you didn't want. Look at the refuse. Suppose you prepare the food and then you get a refuse heap. You wouldn't be happy if you were able to prepare the food and you made no refuse. You'd be happy because it means that you've utilized all the main thing. Okay. So it has to be a bad output. Diana, Emily, give me one. Yeah, Justina.
Doc, please, can we talk about the mining industry and the consequences that the environment experiences as a result of their activity?
Give me specific examples.
Yeah, so example, we can look at
So tell me the good output.
clearing of the
Tell me the
vegetation
bad
to mine, and the fact that, okay, so the good output is that at the end of the day, they're able to mine to get us gold, but the consequences is that sometimes the land is kind of deteriorated to an extent that you cannot even use it for farm activities.
Okay, how do you quantify that?
Okay, so we can quantify that by looking at the size of the land that is being used for the operations, yeah.
And then the size of the land after the operation.
Yes.
Okay. It's still one of the land pollution and all of that. Okay. Any other? Okay, so in a banking industry, in a banking firm, one of the good output is loans. Loan is a performing loan, so it's a good output. Then there is also non-performing loans. That is the loans that people collected, they were supposed to pay, but did not pay. That becomes a bad output. So the non-performing loan is as a result of the performing loan. So the bad output becomes a byproduct of the good output. That's a typical example. Any other example in mind? Okay. Think about them, because these are some of the things that you got to, normally it has to come from the industry in question. The industry in question. That is when you are able to get a good and then a bad output. So you get that. You get that in efficiency analysis. You got to deal with it, and there are models for that. Firm-specific factors, industry-specific, environmental-specific factors. These are other things that are outside the control of management. Please remember, it's only the input and output that are under control of management. We have spoken a lot about homogeneity. So take note. The thing about homogeneity is that the DMUs are identical. They are similar in terms of what they do. In terms of what they do. So please take a note of that. It's not in terms of something else, but it's rather in terms of what they do, okay, as a particular kind of people. Now, next, the level of the inputs are used and they can vary. The input must be incommensurate input. Okay. In other words, they must be comparable with a vector of input with a vector of output that look similar. Okay. And some of the input might be more than others. That is fine. So you can have GCB Bank having more deposits than maybe EcoBank. That is fine. That is acceptable. But the key point is that they must all have deposits equal. How many inputs should you have? The number of inputs versus the number of sample size. Well, there are many criteria. Okay? One of the earliest one is the last one here by Dyson. Okay? Published in the European Journal of Operational Research. You will notice that the sample size should be 2 times the number of inputs times the number of outputs. So if the inputs are 6, the outputs are 6. 6 times 6 is 36. 36 times 2 is 72. So the number of sample size should be at least 73, at least 72 for such a kind of 6 input, 6 output. That was a criteria that was given. So take note of the criteria and do that. All right. Now, if you want, there's something we call the curse of dimensionality. You can tell me what that means. What is a curse of dimensionality? Indeed.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
Hello, Doc.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Please, the N, your definition for N, I think, and the S are almost the same.
The N is a sample size. The S is the number of outputs.
But I think
it's
it's
okay, the typo. All right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is supposed to be sample size. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the curse of dimensionality, what is that? Emily, you should have an idea about the curse of dimensionality.
That please escape me for the moment.
Okay, Dinah, the curse of dimensionality.
Doc, same with me. I'm trying to.
Who has an idea? Those of you in multivariate have taught you this before. But of course, it was referred to in regression. But what is a curse of dimensionality? The number, yes, Isaac, your hand is up. The number of variables relative to the sample size.
Doc, is when your sample size is less than the number.
All right. I didn't fully get it. But it's basically, the curse of dimensionality is that your sample size must be more. If the variables are more, you fall into that trap. It's as simple as that. So just ensure that you got more. A typical example of an educational system, the inputs and outputs, these are what you see here. This, by the way, was the first application of DEA. This paper. This is the first application of DEA. And Emily, this was the one that Kamaho and Dyson used to do their program follow through. You remember that paper?
Yes, Doc.
This is the first application. But the DEA application was done on this, but they did not do the program follow through. They did not do the program efficiency. Well, they didn't. So these people came and did the program efficiency there. And then in 2006, they did the pseudo-MAMCOS on this. And in this paper, the level of murder was measured as a high percentage school dropout among females. So educational level was quantified. The highest occupational level of the family member was quantified. The number of times a parent will visit the student would determine the outcome of the result of the student. Parental counseling index, the number of teachers, all of this. Now, what were the outputs? The outputs were reading score, mathematics score, and self-esteem, inventory score. So this is like vocational skill score. Okay. These were the outputs. And for the output to actually be higher, the input were necessary. So for example, the highest occupation of the family member can determine whether the student is going to do well in the reading or math score. Very, very powerful. Then when you go to medicine, okay, physician care, the hospital they used was an input, office visit is an input, lab and diagnostics tests, if the hospital has got it, emergency room visit, And then finally, the output. Infants and children, the pediatrics ward, okay, whether females and male, all of them, that would be an output. In the cardiac surgeon, these are some of the inputs and output. In nursing homes, these are some of the inputs and outputs. In banks, you can see that out of banks is something we considered already. Labor, branch, computer terminals, expenditure. Then on the right side, you have transactions. What about if it is a university? The number of faculty, so that's the labor. And then research funds. These are the inputs. You can see that there was nothing called the number of incoming students. On the right, you rather have average number of graduates. So that's interesting. Average annual salaries of graduates. And then the publications the school would have made. All of these are practical papers. Let's take a typical example of a university data. The inputs are 1 and 2. The outputs are 1 to 3. Look at it. At this stage, we are ready to formalize the DEA. Okay? I'm about to wrap up towards the formalization. Let X be inputs. Let Y be outputs. Don't forget that. Okay? So M is the number of inputs, total number of inputs being consumed. A particular input is given by I, which is 1, 2, 3, all the way to M. The S is the total number of outputs. A particular output is R. 1, 2, or 3. You can create an input vector and an output vector. This capital X is indicative of the fact that the input is not just a single one, but it's all the inputs put together to get a capital X. This input Xj, J is referred to a particular DMU. And this X is a member of the real numbers of inputs. And there's no 0. And the Y is a number of real numbers, positive real numbers, all the way up to S. And there's 0. So how do you write a particular input vector? This is an input vector. And this very one here is the very input, the level of input. Okay? So you have multiple of the I's and multiple of the J's all coming together to create the XJ. What is efficiency? Efficiency can be of 2 definitions. One is technical, and I ask you all of this in the exam, so there's a technical. Okay. Technical efficiency is not the same as mixed efficiency. Technical efficiency is not the same as mixed efficiency. What is the difference? I'd like somebody to tell us the difference before we wrap up today. Frank, do you have an idea? I mean, attending my class. What's the difference between technical and mixed efficiency? Emily, the difference between technical efficiency and mixed efficiency.
Okay, so if I remember, the technical efficiency refers to the thing output divided by inputs, like the efficiency given by output divided by inputs.
Okay. What you said was so fast and so unclear. So be clear.
Sorry, okay.
As if you are explaining it to a 6-year-old child.
Okay, so from my understanding, for the technical efficiency, it's when you take the weighted sum of outputs and then divide it by the weighted sum of inputs.
You think a 6-year-old child will understand this?
Okay, so Doc, we've been talking about inputs and outputs all along. So to define that technical efficiency is when we take the outputs, like the total outputs that we have, and divide it by the
the mathematical definition of technical efficiency.
Okay.
Until you can explain it to a 7-year-old child, you don't understand. So I want someone to explain it to a 7-year-old child. Okay. What is the difference? Alex, are you in on this? Or this one you will chalk? Diana, what's the difference?
Look, yes, let me give it a try. Technical efficiency has to do with the ability to reduce your inputs in order to maximize output. But then the mixed inefficiency is when a firm is considered being efficient, but then has some slacks. So I think the slacks brings out the difference in there.
Why? How does it bring out the difference?
It means that for if a firm is mixed inefficient, there were some inputs that were not fully utilized. So there were some unused resources available.
Okay, I think you're getting there. Ladies and gentlemen, technical efficiency is the efficiency of a company as a result of management's own experience and knowledge. Is efficiency of the company as a result of the experience. That is what we call technical. So if you remember the word technical bench or the technical team, they bring their knowledge. When the game is not going the way it's expected, they put their knowledge together. The coach is the head of the technical team. And then England will win. That is how it was. That is how come England won. It has to do with knowledge, experience, skills, acumen, technical efficiency. So whatever happened, your knowledge is what made it happen. Technical efficiency. However, you can be, and it is your knowledge about your ability to raise the output, even given the input. So the inputs are fixed, and yet you are still able to use that fixed input to get more output. Deposits are supposed to help us to generate loans. So normally if you get more deposits, you can give more loans. But then you use the existing deposit to give more loans. You're efficient. In this case, it's the output that is being increased. However, it could be that you are able to produce that same output even when you have reduced some of the inputs. So you have two people who are working for you and you are generating $200,000. You reduce the two persons to one person and you are still generating $200,000. What does that mean? What that means is that now you will, without a shadow of a doubt, you will be said to be efficient on the input side because you have been able to reduce the input and still get the same output that you were originally getting. But in all of this, we did not take into consideration the fact that you have slacks. What do I mean? You could reduce the input and still be able to produce the output, making you technically efficient. However, there was another firm that was using, or that was producing the same output you had produced, but it was using less input. If we could find a firm that was using a lesser input to produce the same output you were producing, then your efficiency you found had inefficiency in it. And that inefficiency is on your blind side. And that inefficiency is said to be the mix inefficiency. Now, let's get a mix very well. Anytime you are using the input, you are using the input in conjunction with another input. So, for example, you need a human being to operate a laptop. Now, all the years, you have been having two people who have been using 3 laptops. 2 people are using 3 laptops. They are producing a particular revenue, say $200,000. What you decided to do is you decided to reduce the number of laptops from 1 to 2. And you kept that of the, what do you call it? That of the human beings. You kept it also at 2. So this time, each person is using 1 laptop. And when you did that, you were able to still produce the output you were producing before, that $200,000. In this case, you are efficient. But you could also reduce the workers from 1 and then the laptop by 1 and still be able to produce 200,000. But another guy, all he had to do was just to reduce all the workers to 1 and was able to produce the same output you were using. So even if you are having 2 workers, you are able to produce output, but somebody still has 1 worker and is still able to produce the same thing you were producing, which means there is something that you couldn't do. And that is an indication of mixing efficiency. Mixing efficiency can be of different types. Another kind of mixing efficiency is this. It's your inability to combine the inputs in such a way that you are not able to produce the right output that you are supposed to produce. So you are supposed to use maybe a worker. Okay, I'll leave this one because this one wouldn't make that much sense. But the key point about this input is that there is someone or there's a company that is using a lesser input than what you are claiming to be using. They are using a lesser input and are still producing the output you were producing. You were said to be efficient, all right, but that person is producing the same output and still using a lesser input. Now that lesser input could be both of your input you are using or one of your inputs you are using. And we don't want too many inputs in this case. And that leads to mix inefficient. So you are mix inefficient because you are not able to beautifully, combine the inputs in the right way to be able to produce the output. Alex.
Okay, Doc. Please, I want to know if the understanding I'm getting is correct. So, are we saying that the technical efficiency is like comparing yourself with your former self? So, previously, I was doing this. Maybe I was using 2 inputs and getting 5, but now I've been able to use for example, the same input, which is 2. Now I'm getting 6 or 7. So I can say I'm efficient. And then the mix is comparing my current state with another, not my former self, but like another guy who is doing the same thing using my 2 inputs, but he is not getting 5, he's getting 6. So the difference there, which is the slack, is my inefficiency. Is that what, I don't know if that is the correct understanding.
That is not it.
Okay.
So both of them are your current. So there's no former here. Can we start from that premise? So both of them are current state, not your former state. So in your current state, and remember, you're not comparing yourself with a former, you're comparing yourself with other people in the current state. So you are a particular bank, you are living in 2024, you are comparing yourself with 15 other banks. When we checked the records, one particular bank is not efficient. The reason why it's not efficient is that that bank's input is using, there is another bank, and I'm talking about two inputs. Okay, let's look at two inputs here. There is another bank that is using lesser of the two inputs than this bank, which makes Bank A inefficient, because within the same production possibility state, within the same technological environment, there is another bank currently, not in the past, that is using lesser inputs than this bank J is using. That makes Bank A inefficient, technically. And then that makes Bank B, Bank J efficient, technically. You understand that part before I go to the next one?
Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc.
Emily, your hand is up.
Okay, sorry, Doc. I wanted to see if I could explain the mix to him.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so from what Doc said right now, my understanding is the mixed inefficiency deals with inefficiency that's due to the wrong composition of the inputs and outputs. So because of how the inputs and outputs were arranged, or the number of inputs and outputs involved, that's where their inefficiency is coming from. I don't know if you are getting it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, Doc. So even though the firm can be said to be efficient because of how the composition of its input and output was, there's some slacks there that can be removed whilst it still maintains its efficiency.
Yeah. Normally, when you are using a graph, it makes sense. But I will not do graph today. It's a promise that. So going back to the example I gave you, remember I told you that you have Bank A, Bank B, Bank C. Okay. A is using some input, but the inputs are less. The inputs are less than that of C. So because both of the input X1 and input X2 of DMUA, because they are lesser than what B, than what C is using, it makes A efficient and C inefficient. Do you understand that part? Alex, do you get that part?
Doc, yes, Doc, please, your network was off at the very end, so I couldn't get the last one.
So you have A is using some inputs. Okay. These inputs that A is using, they are both lesser than the input that C is using. It makes A efficient. Remember, they are all producing the same output. Okay. It makes A efficient and it makes C inefficient. You get that part?
Yes, I get it.
Now, even if A's input are both not lesser, but even if one is lesser, A is still efficient, C is inefficient.
Yes.
Let's go to the next one. Now, B is efficient like A. Okay, B is efficient like A. But B is using lesser input for one of the inputs. Now, for the other input, B is using the same input. But for another, A is using a lesser input than B. So in this case, A is a little, not plenty, but a little more efficient than B. because A is using a lesser input in one of the inputs than B is. Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay.
All of them in the current, not in the past. Now, why is that the case? And the reason why that is the case is because the way B is mixing the input, he's mixing it wrongly. And that's what Emily said. There is a wrong use of the input. So as an example, a student can get a very, very good grade. Okay, so let's say that we all have A. Okay, this guy has A and this guy has A. But then that is because the A has a range. When you go and check their scores very carefully, you will notice that one actually had 98 and the other had 80. But because you have not really gone deeper to see the scores of this guy who had A and this guy who had A, both of them would think that they are good equally, isn't it? Until you move away from the grade and go to the marks. Then the one who had the 80 will realize that he almost slipped. Because now by going to the marks, you have been able to detect the true inefficiency. And this inefficiency is not the technical, it is a mixed inefficiency because it was on a borderline. This guy is good, all right, but he is mixing the things wrongly. It happens a lot. Sometimes a particular footballer is so good, but in the latter part of scoring a goal, he's not able to score a goal. So what mixed efficiency does is that it brings out the little inefficiency that is hidden. And that is making the firm inefficient. The thing is that the foundational level of efficiency measurement doesn't peel off this. It's later models that helped us to be able to peel off this. I hope this explains it. So let me ask you something. Which of these two inefficiencies is dangerous? Technical or mixed? Mixed inefficiency and technical inefficiency. Which is more dangerous? Alex, this is on your understanding.
Okay, Doug, I think I will go for the mix.
Okay. Emily, which one will you go for?
Doug say mixed.
Dinah.
And the okay.
Look, technical inefficiency is dangerous.
Yes, I agree with her. It's the technical inefficiency that is dangerous. Why?
Okay, Doug. Okay, for my reason was that for the technical inefficiency, you will know straightforward that you are inefficient. But for the mixed, you have to go deeper in order to know that you are inefficient.
Yeah, but then if you are technically inefficient, you don't even have to go deeper then. If you are technically inefficient, then you are also suffering. Then I don't even have to look at your mixed inefficiency. But when you are mixed inefficient, you could be technically efficient. Just that you are mixed inefficient. So we have to handle technical inefficiency. Then we go further to handle mixed inefficiency. So technical inefficiency it has to be solved. Mixed inefficiency is kind of, you are allowed to make it. It's not good, but you're allowed to make it. That's the angle that we want to see. That is why, honestly, in the literature, a lot of people don't look at mixed inefficiency. Justin, are you here? Justin, are you here? You know why I sometimes call people? Because I want to be sure.
Yes. Look.
What have you learned so far? Yeah, and then here. What have you learned so far?
Yes, so we've discussed DMU, and then we have looked at how we can use, we can describe input and output as far as the DMUs are concerned. And we've also looked at efficiency, that's the technical efficiency, and then the mix. Doc, is this inefficiency? Because on the slide we have technical inefficiency, and that is what we are talking about.
Both.
Yeah.
Once you know the efficiency, you should know the inefficiency. Once you know the inefficiency, you should know the efficiency. The opposite.
Okay. Okay. So we have discussed the technical inefficiency.
If I tell you to tell me the difference, can you tell me?
Yes.
Okay. Don't tell me, you continue.
Okay. So that is where we are. We are still moving.
I'm going to end with radial efficiency and non-radial efficiency. Now you can have radial technical efficiency, and you can have radial non-radial technical efficiency. Take note. Radial technical efficiency is that of efficiency where you maintain the ratio of the inputs or of the outputs. You are maintaining the proportion of the inputs or the outputs. You are maintaining the equiproportion of the inputs or the outputs. When you are reducing the input, you are reducing all of them by the same percentage. When you are increasing the output, you are increasing all the outputs by the same percentage. That's what I mean by radial. Radial is coming from the word radius. Radius is something from the center to the circumference. So anything from a kind of an origin to the edge. So when you look at a circle, any distance from the center to any point of the circle is a radius. And so the distance from the origin, which is in this case the center, to the radius, that is the edge, that makes it radial. And anytime you have such kind of a distance, the movement along the distance will maintain the ratios. And when we come to the proper graphical measurement of efficiency, you will note that the original way of measuring it is using the radial approach. So radial technical efficiency is efficiency measurement from the origin to the boundary of the curve, or in this case, the production possibility curve. That maintains the ratio, that maintains the proportion, that maintains the percentage use of the input or the percentage production of the output. That is radial efficiency. The non-radial efficiency is an efficiency that disconnects the proportion. So that one, you can reduce the input by 10% and rather reduce the other input by 20%. In fact, you can reduce one input by 90% and reduce the other input by 10%. In fact, you can reduce one input by 100% and reduce the other input by 0%. Non-radial, it does not maintain the ratio. Radial, you maintain the ratio. Okay, and whether the inputs or the outputs are 2, 3, 4, 5, still you maintain the ratio of all of them. Please remember that technical efficiency is the same as managerial efficiency. You said it before. You said that technical efficiency is the efficiency due to managers' knowledge, experience, skills, acumen. So we attribute that efficiency to management performance. So if a manager is not doing well, when we measure the technical efficiency, and the technical efficiency is 95%, which means it's not 100%, we attribute the blame to managers. So we can say that the managers are 95% efficient, which means they are 5% inefficient. All right. What are the problems in assessing efficiency? We've looked at them. The major problem is how do you get an input? How do you ensure homogeneity? How do you ensure dimensionality? Okay. And always focusing on radial efficiency, always focusing on relative efficiency instead of absolute efficiency. Next time we meet, we are going to now take a data set and we're going to draw the efficiency and then measure the efficiency based on two approaches. One, based on based on ratio analysis. Two, based on regression approach. And finally, three, based on the approach for this discussion, which is data envelopment analysis. Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the entire caboodle.